Another question, I've heard many things about the different races or tribes, such as Tutsi and Hutus, or the tribes of Somalia or Sudan. How can America, as a still segregated and racist country, try to help in these countries? Should America be involved at all? You want to leave it to?
As I mentioned earlier, I told President Habyarimana democracy is a really tough thing to do. And we've been at it for 200 years, and we're not sure that we have it right yet. And as you've noticed, we still have some serious problems ourselves. I'm not sure that answers the question.
I think America is a country, although probably when we're watching the Vikings, we're all Minnesotans or Americans, especially if we're playing the Milwaukee, not Milwaukee, what is it, the Packers. Yeah. There is a good question here. Oh God, how can I lose it? There was a very good question. Oh yes. If we develop a process of power as a peaceful exchange for a government that represents all of its people, how do you propose individual identification? Recognize all as Rwandan rather than Tutsi Hutu, will assimilate, suffer, or will it create a recognition of shared power?
That I would like. The problem with a state-inspired and state-monitored process of saying there is no Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa simply doesn't work. If this maybe had taken place 100 years ago and somebody had tried and succeeded in creating this Rwandan identity that does not refer to ethnicity, maybe it would have worked. But over the years, during the centuries, but more so during the colonial process, and especially after independence since 1959, the identities have become very, very, very strong. Anybody who goes to Rwanda can tell you that. Even when in public we don't say it, when we go back to our own homes, we actually become Tutsis and we become Hutus. In public they say there is no identity cards. They will say there is no that and that. But the fact of the matter is, if people died because they were Tutsis or they die because they are Hutus, you can no longer say that there are no ethnic identities. And if a government is there, and you can see that for now, it's really a Tutsi minority that is in power, especially key institutions of the government. For example, I will give you an example. If you look at Rwanda's intelligence services today, 100% they are Tutsi. In other words, you cannot figure out the top level of the government of the intelligence of Rwanda. You cannot find there a Hutu. So why would you say that Rwanda has achieved reconciliation and we only talk about Rwandans and there are no Hutus and Tutsis? You go to the military, the Minister of Defense, the Army Chief of Staff, the Chief of Defense Forces, the Permanent Secretary, the top guys in the military, 100% they are Tutsis. So when Kagame says, oh, we've reached a point where we are Rwandans, we are proud of being Rwandans, and not Hutus and Tutsis, that's not true. So I think that the ethnic identities have become very, very strong, that you can no longer legislate them out of existence. Instead, I think we need to approach it from a truth-telling perspective, that we sit down as Hutus and Tutsis, we tell each other comfortably. When I talk to Paul, he's comfortable being Hutu. If somebody calls me Tutsi, I say that's fine. But I don't spend the sleepless nights, looking at myself in the mirror and say, oh, how wonderful it is to be Tutsi. But those who want to do that, that's their business. If somebody, is a Hutu and, every morning looks at herself or himself in the mirror and says, thank God I'm a Hutu, That's okay. But I think when it comes to matters of citizenship, as Rwandans, that's where we need to look at each other and say, come on, folks, maybe Hutus and Tutsis, but this country called Rwanda belongs to all of us, and we've got to figure out exactly how we are going to live together in this country within the rule of law. And I think maybe another conversation like this, since this is a school of law, we need to find time to talk about the rule of law in Rwanda, but some of the things that we're talking about are related to it. So I think it's okay. These three things, just to emphasize, these identities do exist and they have become very strong. Number two, there's nothing wrong being identified as that, but the common ground for all of us is being Rwandans, and that's what we need to encourage, and we need to build on truth in order to slowly by slowly build that kind of Rwandan identity.
Let me just say one or two comments about this. There are those who are very deterministic and say the whole idea of state building in Africa is wrong, has gone, taken the wrong way because people don't share fundamental sort of characteristics a lot of the Europeans. There was Westphalian sort of notion of one language, one culture, one religion, and all of that. And therefore, Rwanda was was not a sustainable project as a nation state. Well, you take the Somalis, and relatively speaking, Somalis don't have the major cleavages among the Rwandans or the Burundi, where you have distinct sort of histories and have these identities which are very deep-seated. But that has not saved Somalia from these internal conflicts. All you need is by the time you are 5 years old, you memorize your genealogy. It's like the Old Testament, so-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so. And it depends where you want to stop. And you relate to people. That's the map. That's the internal map. And you read your genealogy. I think what we can learn from this is the courage, the convictions of people like Theo and Paul and others who are striving to engage in truth-telling, in peaceful dialogue, in trying to have this common vision of what is to be done. If there is anything to be learned, I think that's what Somalis and others have to learn. And it doesn't look, it's not very promising, I hate to say, for the simple reason that there is no organized effort that I know of which is looking through that kind of perspective in trying to strive for the shared history and culture and build up on that. Unfortunately, that's not probably, we are not ripe for resolution yet. I think, as I said earlier, this has been a very, very productive engagement discourse. And I think, I'm really sorry to say, but I actually expected more people to be interested in this, because this really has a very, very serious sort of discussion on fundamental issues in a specific country and in terms of recent history. Was it Chou En-lai who was asked to comment on the French Revolution, and he said, it's too recent. We cannot talk about it because, it's too recent. I think the Rwandan experience, probably even for a Rwandan, is too recent. The deep wounds, even going back to 1959. But I think the effort to, normally the research that's done in Africa, I call it extractive research. And what that means is an analogy from all the mining that goes on. The minerals are taken and you leave very big holes out there. What happens to the research? It's always taken out it ends up in beautiful libraries in Europe and developed countries. I hope, and the beginning here of even the taping all of this and going it on stream, and for people in Africa to hear this, I think this is a wonderful, wonderful step. And this cannot be called extractive, although one can turn around and say, and how many Somalis have television and have access to computer and will be, you know, eating up all of this. I think it's a very good beginning, and I'm very encouraged by what Peter and this university college are doing in terms of making this research effort something that is of direct relevance to everyday politics in a place like Rwanda, in a place like Kigali, where people can, at least if they have access to this kind of exercise, if Theo and Peter cannot be allowed to have this engagement in the university in Kigali or in one of the suburbs, at least it can be done from a distance. But how do we make sure that this work is available? How do we make sure this incredible, in terms of files and documentation here, is made available at least to those who are being trained on the legal, traditional legal fields, and the future generations of not only Rwanda, but the Nigerians, Ethiopians, and whoever. I think we all need that. And I want to thank and encourage Peter to keep up the good work. I was really very concerned. I was out of the country when I heard over the BBC and actually CNN that he was in prison in Kigali. I was extremely worried for his life, and I'm glad he made it, that his life was saved, and he's with us and is doing this wonderful work. This is my first time I'm meeting the ambassador, Theo and Paul. I think it's a wonderful group, and I have become a member of, honorary member of these enemies of the Rwandan state. I think by association I'm going to be part of this crowd, so I will postpone any future plans to go to Kigali. Yes, sir. Yes. And you have been a very wonderful group audience, and I hope this flame will be kept very much lit, and hopefully will be of direct relevance, as I was saying, to what's happening back home in Africa. Thank you very much.